Good day and welcome to the Senior Moment. This is Connie Clark with Home Helpers, and this afternoon in the studio I have Patrick Blum with the Disability Action Center, and I thought we'd kind of talk about what the Disability Action Center does, because I know there's several different pieces over there and each person does a different function. So welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Connie. Yes, the Disability Action Center is one of 700 such offices across the country and territories. We are an agency that is based on the principle of empowerment. We all follow the 4 core services. All centers follow the 4 core services, and that includes advocacy, peer-to-peer communications, independent living skills training, and information and referral. Because we are all people with disabilities, and I am a person with a disability, that peer-to-peer is one of the strongest connections we make. Because where else would you go if you wanted to feel safe, wanted to feel that you're not alone, and that somebody's been there and done that? Obviously, somebody who has a disability has empathy for those things.
Well, first, back up a minute. Describe disability, because it's not just physical disability. Is that correct?
Right. And I appreciate you saying that. We cover all the disabilities. Most people do have that idea of disabilities from the placards, of course, you know, the little schematic drawing of somebody in a wheelchair.
That's what I was going to say, not necessarily someone in a wheelchair.
Right. Physical disabilities, mental health, and learning disabilities are all that we cover. So it's the disabilities you can see and the disabilities that you can't see. And we service all of those. And ages basically 18 through, 108. Yeah, you know, and so, like I said, all 700 of us follow those same ideas, that it is cross-disability and that the 4 core services remain the same throughout all the centers.
Is this a governmental agency, a nonprofit agency? What is it?
We are not. We're kind of in a neat position. We are a 501(c) nonprofit. We get most of our money through the federal government. We do get some state money. When the centers were created back in the 80s, most of the money was geared toward that creation came through the Department of either Education or Vocational Rehabilitation, depending on what state you were in. Voc Rehab is the main money person that gives us money. As far as the chain of command goes when it comes through funding. So that's what separates us. We are kind of that pseudo-governmental agency as well as being a nonprofit. So we're in a very neat position.
So you're a nonprofit, but you get grants and that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And we do the education to the lawmakers and policymakers, which is not lobbying because we don't pay money for it. We don't have paid lobbyists. We just educate.
And your office here is associated with the one in Moscow and the one in Lewiston, is that correct?
Yes, the Disability Action Center has its headquarters in Moscow, or Moscow, Idaho, and the branch offices are Lewiston and Coeur d'Alene.
Are there ones over in the Spokane area? Is there a Disability Action Center over there?
There are sister centers for independent living. Our sister organization out there, which is another center, is CORD, the Coalition of Responsible Disabled.
Okay.
And they cover, Spokane County and most of those counties over on that side. Washington State has 5 centers for independent living with their branch offices. Idaho has 3 centers for independent living with all their branch offices.
Okay, and you said that there were different pieces. The one I'm familiar with is the one for personal assistance. And that is something you work through the Medicaid system, correct?
Yes.
So describe what that is, because I know a lot of seniors use that.
Not all centers have used what we call the personal assistance program. We do. And the personal assistance program is, as it sounds, that if you need somebody to be in your home because you want to stay at home, because we all know home is the best place. It's the one that's the most cost effective. It's the one that's the healthiest for most people. By doing that, by able to stay at home, sometimes you need a little help, and you can get a personal assistant. What separates us, though, from the more traditional agencies is that we have, again, it's by that independent living philosophy that the person chooses who they want to give their services, and which means it can be a neighbor down the street, a family member. They are self-determining. The person themselves is self-determining. They're the ones who say what they need, what they want to focus on. They develop their plan of how to live independently. And then the person who is the caregiver obviously does those plans. We do have a nurse reviewer that goes out to the homes, and so that we know how many hours can be given to a person. But that's the neatest thing, is it separates us from the traditional agencies, is that you are the person of record. You are like running a small business, if you will, of your own life.
So you would figure out who you wanted to care for you, and if you don't know, will you help them find somebody?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The beauty of our position is that because it's centered on the person, because it is that person's choice. If they don't like our program, we make sure that they know who all of the providers in the area are, and leave that on the table, and we are fully honest about, the folks that we know, and let them make their own decisions. People can make their own decisions quite fine, thank you very much. We just lay out the information and say, hey, here's everything that's in the community. Make your choice, because your choice is valuable. So if it isn't us, it might be somebody else, and that's fine.
And when they go through the Disability Action Center for a personal assistant, they have to do all the paperwork.
Well, most of the paperwork. I mean, of course, obviously, if they have a reasonable accommodation necessary, like if they can't read or other things, well, that's a reasonable accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and being people with disabilities and a Center for Disabilities. Of course, we would help them with that. But but they are their own lives. They run their lives. And so it is strongly dependent on them to be the ownership of their lives. We don't do things for people. We give them the tools, we give them the teaching and all the information, and then they do with it what they will.
And then their assistants are paid through the Disability Action Center
via
Medicaid.
Via
Medicaid. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the only one that I know a lot about, although I have talked to you folks about maybe some of the buildings around here that might need accommodations for their residents with disabilities. Now, one of the things that you talked about was the peer-to-peer. Now, what is that?
Again, because I am a person with a disability, and because the mandate for all centers in this country is that they must be run by people with disabilities in the majority. That's a different avenue than what most people are used to in the business model, in the medical model. We're not experts. We're peers. We're people who are people with disabilities helping others with disabilities. You've been in my office many times. We don't dress up. I'm just wearing my Packer sweater today as usual. And
still hoping.
because our clientele, most of our consumers know and are intimidated by the so-called professional, because professionals have a tendency to talk down to people, to demand they do something instead of asking, what do you want to do? And we reflect that idea that we're just people. We are just human beings helping out other human beings. And so peer-to-peer is one of the strongest connections, because if you are a person with a disability of any kind and you walk into the office, as I mentioned before, how safe do you feel knowing that somebody's there who gets it, who has empathy, who has been there, done that? And that right there puts a whole different spin and lays a full, clean table for somebody to be able to talk to another person who gets it, who can say what they need to say, vent what they need to vent, and know that they're talking to somebody who actually cares about them and who, like I said, because of that empathy, knows what they're going through, at least in the most general way.
What kind of questions do you have? I don't want to get to the point where you're revealing confidences or anything, but in general, what kind of questions do people come in and ask? Or do they come in and look for resources? Or
they do all of that. We can have anything from the simple things like, what is the number to the Social Security office, or how do you start the process to Social Security, which of course we say call the Social Security office, because that's their job. That's really what they're there for. It can be as simple as that, like if somebody wants to learn how to if there's any devices to help them open a can of pickles, for instance, or something, and they only have one arm, let's say, or they're crippled with arthritis or something, there's assistive technology that can help them do that. It could be that simple, or it could be the other end, the really big stuff that I'm involved in quite a big way. What we call systems change advocacy. That's changing attitudes, changing laws, making sure people with disabilities have an equal footing with people who are not disabled yet. And so those are the big ones. That's anything from like the young man who came in who was denied an education at North Idaho College because they wouldn't allow his service dog to be with him. It can be as big as issues as those. It's the cuts to Medicaid and workers' hours that we had in the state of Idaho a few years ago that we have to battle with and make sure that our policymakers know that that's not acceptable. So it can be any of those things. I had a caller one time who felt like they were being discriminated against because their doctor was trying to force them into deciding what gender they wanted to be because they weren't sure themselves. And the doctor said he could fix them and he could give them a pill to help them decide to be either a male or a female, and which of course is absolutely ridiculous and quite inhumane and unethical in my opinion. That person has every right to choose either gender or no gender at all if that's how they feel about it, quite honestly. And I was appalled and quite angered by that and told him the grievance process against doctors and to file against that doctor and to make sure that it never happens, that things like that never happen again.
So if someone feels that the place they work, the place they live, the place they go to school doesn't have the accommodations that they need, they can come to you all and you would help advocate for them? Or?
We can teach people how to get through that system, who to contact, so they can find out what the grievance process is and then follow that process all the way through, no matter how far and how long it takes, until they get what they need and what is ethical and just.
Yeah, because like I said, I know I have worked with you all. We had someone who lived in a building that was all seniors in walkers and wheelchairs, and they didn't have an automatic door.
Mm-hmm.
And so we helped them get an automatic door.
Right.
Simple things like that.
Right.
So if you see or live in a situation like that, you can help.
Absolutely. The whole thing is that we don't, again, because we don't do for people, we teach them to do for themselves. It is very important for that person to be the one who wants to go forward with this and that they follow through. They don't just get up and leave, because many of the processes are to the point that the folks on that side of the issue will try to do everything to make sure that they get off it, do the intimidation, whatever they can, so that somebody won't go through the process. And what we would say is, we're here behind you. We're standing right behind you. We're supporting you. Do not fall back. Do not stop. Go the full measure, and it will help you, and it will help all of your brothers and sisters of the human race who are dealing with the same issue get what they need.
So if someone all of a sudden becomes disabled or is dealing with a family member who is really having difficulties and has no idea where to go, what to do, what's available, you have the resources there to tell them what kind of things are available in our community and where to find those resources.
Absolutely. The information and referral piece that I referred to you as one of our core services, one of the main reasons why centers are so important in their communities that they serve. If I didn't go out there, and you know me very well, I'm building those relationships. So is Virgil and Selena, building those relationships with everybody they can possibly build with, because we know inevitably somebody will call in and they will need some kind of knowledge, some kind of wisdom that they didn't know before of their resources, and those ties that we have made will be probably one of those very resources. And so it doesn't matter what it is. If it's human rights, if it's something simple like assistive technology, if it's needing a sign language interpreter, if it's a support group, we know numbers, we know people, and we continue to build that base of knowledge in every day that we're out there. because I'm not going to settle for, Virgil's not going to settle for, Mark Leeper, my boss, is not going to settle for having centers that don't do what they're supposed to do. And that's one of the main pieces, is building those alliances.
I know one of the things that I had talked to you all about a couple of years ago was housing.
Mm-hmm.
You know where all the different housing is located so far as low-income housing, housing specifically for people with mental illness, that sort of thing?
We have we get the same list that everybody does through our great friend Bob Driscoll and all the other folks. I don't know where they all are, at least physically, but I do know if somebody calls and says that they feel like that a place is not accessible, then the whole issue obviously gets brought up, and that's usually a call to that consumer will make a call down to Intermountain Fair Housing for any housing things that might be inequitable, and that can be simple too. Like I said, we don't want to be the enemy of anybody, but if they want to bring that fight, more power to them, because we're not going to lay down for anybody, and we don't fear anybody. So when people call us, they get that sense of, we are advocates, we are independent living specialists, and that's the way it goes. We are part of the civil rights movement, and we always will be.
Well, I need to take a break here, but I want to continue talking about the services of the Disability Action Center, because whenever I'm stuck and don't know what direction to go in, especially when I'm dealing with people that are in situations they have no clue where to go, whenever I call your office, I always have a direction after that. And so you're a great resource, not just for individuals, but for businesses and agencies when they have people that work with them or for them or that they're serving.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we're going to keep talking, and we will be right back. Is there anything you in particular would like to talk about?
Well, you probably heard about the latest attempt to hopefully revive the 2020 plan, Coeur d'Alene 2020. That's what some of those meetings were for, the one that Bob sent out. If that goes through, that's going to be huge.
What's that going to mean?
Well, the vision of Coeur d'Alene for the future, how we as a community want to see Coeur d'Alene be in 10 years, 20 years, whatever the case might be. We need everybody at the table. We need everybody at the table. As I said in the meeting, I said in one of the presentations, we must have an all-inclusive city. A city that really does not only say that it's inclusive, but really is inclusive. So that means everything from accessibility, to recognizing that we have people with mental health issues and learning disabilities and physical disabilities that deserve to go where they need to go without barriers, without, any baloney, and that they are accepted, that they are every bit a part of this community and not second-class citizens. That's definitely one thing we need to talk about, I believe. And of course, secondly, that our celebration for the ADA is going to focus on veterans, and that we need the vets to to start calling and putting in their input so we know what that celebration will look like, because we've got vets coming home with disabilities now, PTSD, TBI. Let's actually put our money where our mouth is as a community, because a lot of people say they love and support the troops. Well, let's prove that by start getting them the services they need. Let's start finding out how we can support them and how we can build a better community for them.
All right. We'll continue. And don't move your chair, you squeak. Okay, you ready? And welcome back to the Senior Moment. Again, this is Connie Clark with Home Helpers, and I have Patrick Blum here from the Disability Action Center. And we've been talking about the services that the center provides to our community to help people stay independent, to help provide services, a central point in the community to call if you need information. And one of the things we were talking about in the break was how cities really do need to plan when they're looking at the future, that they take into consideration those persons in our community who have disabilities, so that those things are made, are part of the plan.
Right, exactly.
And what kind of things were you talking about? Because you were throwing out some examples of, like right now, in our city that they're talking about the 20-year plan and where they want our city to be. And so you were saying that we really do need to make sure that there are accommodations and resources in place so that in 20 years we will be able to take care of these situations and have those resources. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, think about this. If we're planning to want to see what Coeur d'Alene looks like in 10 years, 20 years, whatever the case might be, imagine a city that is beautiful, because it is, already is, but where only those people who are not disabled yet can use it.
Yeah, who knows what 10 years is going to bring to all of us?
Exactly.
In 20 years from now, I'm going to be really, really old, you know, so I would like for my city to, you know, that I could get around my city.
Exactly. And so this is that process of making sure that whatever design, whatever we see as a vision for Coeur d'Alene, for the area, you know, for Kootenai County, be one that all people are at the table. And I do mean all people. When we mean inclusiveness, we mean inclusiveness. For too long, this area seems to have the idea that, unfortunately, there are still people in the city who don't think that the Aryan nations exist anymore, that there's no racism, that there's no homeless people, and all this other nonsense that I keep hearing. When we have this kind of disconnect, we need to really be talking to each other a little better and a little more, because it's nonsense. The homeless population is large. A lot of them are veterans coming back from war.
A large
Then that's not fair to them at all. And we say we love the troops, and yet we don't do anything to help them. That's called hypocrisy. We need people to understand we don't have enough housing that's accessible and affordable. We have a 44-month waiting list for people for subsidized housing right now. That's not acceptable, all right? We have shelters like the women's shelter, or I should say the North Idaho Violence Prevention Center's shelters, and the men's shelters, and the transitional housing that are not accessible to people who have physical and sometimes even mental health issues, okay? Not acceptable. So any plan has to have ideas of, when we expand those into those areas, when we get to those things that we need the most as a city, they cannot be left somewhere in a back room on a shelf gathering dust. They've got to be in the plan, and they've got to show that we care about these citizens.
So if someone is trying to find affordable housing, and I'll do the physical disability because it's easiest for me to kind of see in my mind, and you've got somebody in a wheelchair, the affordable housing that we have now does not accommodate that, or most of them don't?
A lot of them do not.
So you might be on the list for 44 months, and when someplace comes up, you still can't live there.
Yeah, good luck. I mean, that's basically, unfortunately, how it comes. We don't have enough housing stock as it is, and that we do, a lot of it is not accessible physically or mental health issue-wise either. And so what do? You know, are we just going to turn a blind eye and hope it goes away? It's not going to go away. So we have to step up as a community and say, look, this is necessary. This is necessary not just for people with disabilities. It's for anyone who has issues that they're dealing with. Because, quite frankly, as you get older, and you may have mobility issues, and it may not be a disability per se, but you still have a disability, you still have a mobility issue. Wouldn't it be nice to have that no step entry, 40-inch doors, maybe rails if you need them along the walkway, definitely in the bathroom, definitely in the shower, those kind of things. Wouldn't it be nice to know that that's there? Wouldn't that be nice to know that that drugstore down the street that you get your prescriptions from is completely accessible, that you can get your power chair into if you've got one? Wouldn't that be nice? You know what I'm saying? Those are the things that we've got to think about. For our brothers and sisters with mental health, we have to stop that NIMBYism, the not in my backyard baloney. People with mental health illnesses already have enough barriers. So why are we making it tougher for them? When we put up housing that looks to try to alleviate some of the problem because of the issues that they're having, let's build those and stop the whining and stop acting like jerks and stop acting like, oh, I've got mine and since you don't have yours, too bad, so sad. We've got to get away from this mentality. It is destroying our culture is destroying our society.
Is that because I know in our city where you're advocating for all of this, this sounds like something that probably goes on across the country.
Of course it does.
I would say that every city out there is dealing with these issues.
Right. But here's the difference. For those cities that actually planned with everybody at the table, they have solved many of those issues. The man who was here, who was talking about, Stephen Ames, who was talking about his work of building city, of helping cities project into the future, talked about everybody being at the table, you know, in all those cities he worked in. And many of those big problems disappeared. Why? Because everybody was at the table. He had places in Bend, Oregon, where he's from, that were very similar to ours, that were natural places, but they could still be beautiful, and they could all be accessible, and they all are or about to be, you know, completely accessible, physically and otherwise. How neat is that? How wonderful is that? You see what I'm saying? Even McEwen, a park that has so much controversy. Did you know that there's a part of the field, part of the project, McEwen Field, where they have the children's play area that has a sensory wall? And for those of you who don't know what a sensory wall is, not every child plays the same. They may have autism. They may have other mental health issues. A sensory wall is a place for those children who play differently to be part of their environment and enjoy the environment just like all the other children, except it is a different way for them so they can participate. They had a sensory wall in the plan, which goes far and above the ADA, but it warms my heart because somebody was actually looking at my brothers and sisters who play differently. Now, how wonderful, and I'll see how wonderful is that. Why can't we continue to do that instead of being a bunch of whiners and complainers and let's do nothing that I see so much in this area? We've got to get rid of that mentality.
Now, you were talking about the ADA. I had heard from someone that there were some new ADA rules that came out for accessibility in buildings and things like that. Do you all get involved in any of that so far as advising or looking at buildings and saying, no, they don't accommodate?
Oh, absolutely. I'm an old accessibility agent. Virgil, my partner in crime there in the office, is an agent as well. My boss, Mark Leeper, is an agent. We can come to a business if they want and say, and then just look at it and say, well, here's what we found. Here's what you might want to think about. Remember, it's not just physical. It's not just physical access. It's mental health access. It's for people who have severe allergies and may be exposed to perfumes and other things like that, who could go into terrible, coughing spells or what have you, because of their allergies. We've got to be sensitive toward our brothers and sisters, is what I'm speaking to. And to do that, the Americans with Disabilities Act has helped so many folks and businesses realize this is how you do it. It's a very simple, very straightforward law. It's one of the best laws ever written in this country. And there's a reason for that, because it's very simple, the language is very plain, there aren't loopholes, and it's very clear.
Because I could see in a building if you needed a ramp or rails, how would you make a building more accommodating to someone with a mental illness?
Well, let's think about that. For instance, let's say that you are a person with autism, and you want to get services. Some people on the autism spectrum, need very defined, shall we say, ways of doing things, like lists, for instance.
Okay.
What would it hurt to have, this is how you get to this service, if it's asked for, as an accommodation. Here are the steps, here's who you see, here's the department, here's a little map of how you get there. It could be something that simple.
Oh, okay.
It could be that if someone's going to see a counselor, let's say, that wouldn't it be nice that counselor is someone who actually knows and has studied mental health rather than just being taught from a book, that they've actually worked in the community, worked with NAMI, worked with some of the mental health groups to really understand people with mental illness, so that people have a choice as of whether they just want to go to a guy with a PhD at the end of their name, or someone who actually has worked with people who have mental illness.
Would things like lighting or window coverings or things like that be things you would want to take into account?
Absolutely. Think of people who might have, they could have anything from certain eye disorders where they might have a seizure. You can always take those things into effect. The lighting that we see, like the fluorescent lighting, is really bad for people who suffer through seizures, for instance. If someone needed to have a room that was darker, well, why don't we just have it? Or that you could dim the lights. It's not expensive, guys. It can be done from the blueprints, from the very blueprints to already have that, put in. So there's no expense to anybody.
Because, you walk into an office building, they have the fluorescent lights. It's on and off. It's not on and then lower.
Exactly. And of course they flicker, which is really bad for people with seizure disorders. You may not notice it, but fluorescent lights do flicker, and it's not really good. If you have someone who has other learning disabilities, for instance, and they want to get to the computer, you have the list of sites that are accessible sites, for those who are colorblind or those who have different vision things going on with them, anything that you can be prepared for. And none of them are very expensive to do. Some are free. So why not do it from the beginning, from the ground up, so that everybody can participate?
Yeah, because, I was just thinking off the top of my head, I wouldn't know what kind of accommodations you would make. But then as you were talking, things started coming to my mind. And now I'm thinking, well, if you have a public office where people walk in, the Social Security Administration, or a business where could have anybody walk into your business, you would want to make sure that you have those accommodations for anybody that walked into that.
Exactly. I mean, how cool would it be that, let's say you had severe dyslexia, you were a person with severe dyslexia, and your part of your coping skills was to have things read to you. The reasonable accommodation being, is there somebody there who might be able to read to you, or does the computer have Dragon 10, which is an excellent program for people who maybe can't focus on letters and such, because it speaks to you. It takes the literature that is being read, and it just speaks to you through headphones, and you can hear every word that's being said. Those are simple fixes. Those are simple things that can be done to help anybody with any barrier get to what they need, go through what they got to go through, and then be able to live a full life just like anybody else.
And you're throwing out things that I hadn't even talked about or thought about when you said colorblind. Well, oh, yeah, okay, if someone's colorblind, that's a major problem, especially when you're looking on the computer and that's all colors. Everything's different color coded and everything. And then when you were talking about dyslexia, yeah, you read all kinds of things. So how could you do that if it was hard for you to read?
Yeah, why not have reading machines that instantly make the font really large for those who are losing their eyesight or even legally blind. It's not hard to do. It just isn't. But you can't be lazy as a society. That's the problems. We have a lot of lazy people in society who don't want to do for other people.
Yeah, because I didn't even think of them as a disability, but that would really make things hard.
Right.
If you had those.
Right. And then when you're building your streets or revising your streets, why not have more of the talking lights like we do at Kathleen, that we have at Kathleen in Government, which my friend Larry helped really was the bulldog for that one, really pushed that one through to get those lights, especially at that corner, because that's a pretty dangerous corner. But there's a lot of other places in this city that could definitely use talking lights and that kind of thing for people to get across, especially Northwest Boulevard and Government where they meet. That's a nasty little hill and corner right there. But there's a lot of those places like that we can make better.
Yeah, because I can think of, especially going across 95 or across Government.
Right.
Some of those intersections are really scary.
They are.
When you can see and you can hear and, and couldn't comprehend the whole thing, it's scary to
Exactly.
walk
And
across.
so those have to be in plans and should always be in any vision plan that comes about. And to do that means that any advisory committee or board or whatever you want to call it that is created to make those plans must have everybody at the table. That means people with disabilities, that means seniors, that means veterans, that means everybody at the table.
Interesting. Well, I want to keep talking about this because you keep bringing up all these things I hadn't even thought about. And that's one of the reasons I like to talk to you, Patrick. You're so interesting. So we're going to take a break, and we will be right back.
Yeah, it's getting warm in here. Yeah, it is. So I'd like to talk about stigma and stereotypes, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Because that's the biggest barrier. Those are the biggest barriers.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The last part?
Mm-hmm.
And welcome back to the Senior Moment. Again, this is Connie Clark with Home Helpers, and I have Patrick Blum here with the Disability Action Center. And we've been talking about persons with disabilities, not just physical, but mental, and everything we've been talking about, everything from someone in a wheelchair to being colorblind and everything in between. And a lot of the services that the Disability Action Center provides to our community, we've been talking about how that all of those folks need to be in the planning for communities so that we can make accommodations for them. You know, when you brought that up, I was thinking, okay, yeah, 2013, yeah, planning for that, or 2030 rather. Then I thought, oh my goodness, I will be probably 80 years old then. I will need some accommodations.
Right.
And a lot of us don't think about that, you know, how old we're going to be at that time. And yeah, we probably will need some accommodations.
That's why we talk about in the disability rights and independent living movement about people with disabilities and people who don't have disabilities yet, because we believe firmly that if you live long enough, you will gain something that will be a barrier in your life.
You will have something, yes, absolutely. It may be your sight, it may be your ability to walk, it may be your ability to be able to smell things. I mean, I had an aunt who couldn't smell things and couldn't taste things. That made for real interesting browses through her refrigerator.
I'm sure.
So there's all kinds of different things. And one of the things that you brought up during the break was stereotypes. And yeah, I probably do have some stereotypes in my mind just because of what my experience has been,
right,
or lack of experience, put it that way.
Stigma and stereotypes and labels of people are the biggest barriers of anything else. And it's the biggest thing that we fight on a daily basis. People with disabilities, especially those of us in the movement, in the disability rights movement, are quite frankly sick and tired of these well-worn stereotypes and stigmas. The person who gains a disability after they've been non-disabled, they grew up and then suddenly it hits them something happens. And then people start treating them like they're children, or that they can't learn anything, or they can't do anything. It gets real tiring.
Very frustrating.
These are your brothers and sisters. They are your fellow human beings. They deserve as much respect as anyone else, and that includes dignity, that includes equality. If you treat them any way other than that, you're not being a full human being, and quite frankly, you're being the opposite. So we need to get rid of these. We need to get rid of those things. We've done a pretty good job of some things. For instance, the old words, and I hate to use them, but I will, just for this piece, like retarded, we got rid of that word in most of the laws. Absolutely offensive, extremely offensive to my brothers and sisters with learning disabilities. No such thing as retarded, folks. And thankfully, that's gone. But we also we have to get rid of things like insane, and we have to get rid of terms like off their meds, off their rocker, handicapped. I want you to think of, all of you listeners to think of this. Whenever you hear words like that, like retarded, handicapped, and other words like that, think of them like what the N-word is to a black person. If you think of it that way, how offensive the N-word is to a black person, you know, then you'll know what we feel, because handicap is only for bowling, horse racing, and a few other sports, okay? It is not for people. I came from World War I when the vets came back and were on the corners with their hat or cap in their hand, begging for money. We do not beg for money, okay?
I didn't know that's where that comes
That's where it comes from. That's why it's offensive. There's no such thing as handicap, like I said, unless you're doing racing or bowling or any of the other sports like that.
And I'll take the handicap in bowling.
Yeah, right. And so make sure you watch your words. This is not being politically correct. This is being human and being equal to other people. This is how we change attitudes. Language is the first way you change attitudes. We are people with disabilities. I am not ankylosing spondylitis Patrick. I am Patrick who has ankylosing spondylitis. Okay? So we've got to get rid of this whole nonsense that we've been going through once and for all. Okay? And to do that, we must retrain ourselves. There's no handicap parking. It's accessible parking. Okay? That's part of the stigma. You've got to break it. People with mental health illnesses are not out there trying to get a gun and killing people. All right? Let's get over with. Let's get this cards on the table. All right? Most times, people with mental health illness are 7 times likelier to be the victims of violence than to do violence. After the Sandy Hook thing, or Sandy Cove, shooting, they blamed autism for what he did. No, autism had nothing to do with that shooting. All right, he had evil intent already. What he wanted to do, autism had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I think you're correct when you. Well, I know you probably are when you're saying that a person with mental illness or with some sort of disability, they are probably more likely to be the victim.
Absolutely.
Because I would say they would be thought of as easy marks.
They are thought of as easy marks, except for those of us who are empowered and who fear nobody. And as my mentor would say, come over, who uses a wheelchair, would say, come over here and find out how vulnerable I am. And he's built like a brick, And so we have to get rid of these things, Connie. More than anything else that we do. All the services that DAC do are wonderful, but none of them will have any impact if we as a society don't fix ourselves. And part of that fixing is to get over the nonsense that if you have a disability, it's a shame to have it. It's not. I'm not ashamed to have a disability whatsoever. And that we treat them as second-class citizens or third-class citizens, not acceptable. Okay? We've been through this once before. There used to be fountains that said for colored people only. There used to be a time when it was okay to call a woman anything you wanted to, and there's nothing she could do to rebuke that. There was times like that in our country. We don't want to go back to those times. We want to go forward to where everyone is equal, everyone plays a part, and everyone is treated like an adult, like a fellow human being, with respect and with dignity. It really isn't that hard, but that's up to the individual to decide whether or not they want to be jerks and fools, or do they want to be human beings capable of empathy, capable of showing to their fellow human being that they actually care about them and will treat them justly and equally. Really, it's not that hard. But for some folks, I guess they would rather, take the easy way of scapegoating people and stereotyping people rather than learning, rather than growing a little bit of a brain and common sense and being, again, that fully realized human being that they probably should try to be, rather than some kind of stereotype or some kind of label or some kind of fool.
I know, in the business that I'm in, we see a lot of people that had no disability at all. And as they get older, things start happening to their bodies. Things start happening to their eyes. And all of a sudden, they can't do the things they could do before. They physically can't. And it's interesting to watch the families react to that, because they're so used to seeing their mother being able to walk up and down the stairs and to, take the dog for a walk or whatever, and now she can't. And they get very frustrated and angry, and angry with their mom and angry with themselves for feeling that. And it's really hard, I think, for a lot of people when they've seen someone who for 60, 70 years, did not have any of those problems, and now all of a sudden they're having these problems.
Well, I mean, I was a former teacher. I'm certified for life in 7 subjects. That was my life. I loved being a teacher. My disability, unfortunately, my condition just would not allow me to do that any longer, because teaching takes a lot of time, a lot of hours, and I don't have the endurance for that. Okay? took away. I wanted to run for politics. I wanted to be a politician. I wanted to be at the federal level as a senator, preferably for my home state of Wisconsin. I can't do that because the campaign is far too grueling and would be far too grueling on my body.
And so that's very frustrating.
And it's very frustrating for me.
Plans,
yes.
And now life has turned you down a different corner.
But it has made me stronger. You know me. A lot of folks in the community know me and know that I'm a strong, obnoxious, loud, outspoken advocate, and I will always be that. But what about those who maybe are not as loud and not as shameless and not as fearless as this shameless agitator is? What about them? This is why centers have to exist, to give people the idea that they have the ability to stand up for themselves, to speak out, to use their power, and to change the world. Because as Gandhi says, is absolutely true. You have to be that change that you seek in the world. And that goes for all of my brothers and sisters. They know this in their hearts, that nothing will change unless they stand up. So we hope that if they don't know how, that they will come to DAC or any other center across this country and get educated, know their rights, and start standing up and changing attitudes and changing the laws so that at some point all of us really are equal.
So having 700 centers in the United States, I would venture to say that wherever you are in the United States, there's probably a disability action center
version. Absolutely. Every state has at least one. Every state has at least one state independent living council that covers the entire state and deals with state issues, which I'm a proud member of the Idaho State Independent Living Council. So we get it from both ways, and we do the work necessary for our brothers and sisters, those voices that maybe are too shy or not quite up to the level of being shameless and fearless like we are. But that's okay. I will be the voice, and my partner Virgil will, and anybody else at DAC will be those voices to give that sense that if Patrick can do it, I can do it. If Virgil can do it, I can do it. And then they will get that spine and they will get that voice, because I've seen it happen. I've had many people walk through my door here at DAC when I worked at Independence First in Milwaukee, or even my first independent living center in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, where people would come to the door kind of, frightened, walking out, basically just as loud as me, just as shameless as I am, just as fearless as I am, and taking it to the policymakers, the movers and shakers, and the people who run things in this country, and giving them the wherewithal. And that's the beauty of any civil rights movement, including ours. And we will continue that movement long after I'm gone, and the next generation that takes it up. And we'll be here until everyone is equal.
Now, if you have a loved one somewhere else in the United States that is looking for resources, that is looking for help, they can call your office and you can tell them the numbers for those places?
Absolutely. And there are many sites, including the National Conference for Independent Living, which we call NICL site, that which is, I'm also part of the National Conference as well, where they can go and they can find their closest center. And it's just wonderful, and their closest state independent living council. It's wonderful to see more of them. There's even independent living centers in other countries, Australia, France, Germany. Just neat thing to see.
What's the website if someone wanted to go on there?
It would be www.ncil.org. So www.ncil.org, and it's on the left. It's on the right hand side, where you scroll down and it will say, find your independent living center, nearest independent living center. And like I said, Idaho has 3 with all of their, of course, all of their branch offices.
Okay.
Washington they're back up to 5, I think. They should be back up to 5. And hopefully I think they'll be opening at least a couple more. So it's a good thing.
And your office has moved. You used to be downtown.
Yes.
And you're off Government now,
yes,
correct?
We're off Government. We're at 3700 North Government Way, Suite L. We are right next to the chocolate shop in the Antique Mall.
I was going to say the chocolates, yeah.
Yeah, right behind what used to be the Rock and Robin restaurant, which is now called the Broken Egg restaurant. And so we're easy to find. That's why we moved up to Government, because it's a little easier for accessibility. Bus stops are close by, that kind of thing. And like I said, and it's a bigger space than what we had down in Sherman, which we really needed, by the way. And so, yeah, and we're glad to help people with disabilities or those who don't have disabilities yet. We're glad to help businesses, city councils, governor's task forces, anything. We are here. We are ready. And as you know me, Connie. We're right. We can go and do what needs to be done because this voice isn't going to shut up anytime soon.
I know you helped because you were able to get this taken care of, and I know all those residents are very, very grateful. If someone wanted to call you, what number would they call?
208-664-9896. We serve the 5 northern counties. That is all the way from the Canadian border all the way down, well, for us at least, to Benoit, and then the other 2 offices in Moscow and Lewiston go all the way down to Riggins. So the 10 northern counties are covered by the entire Disability Action Center circles, if you will. And like I said, we are involved in a lot of things. And if you have a group we need to present to, if you have faculty members or your colleagues who are saying things maybe that sound a little bit not so nice about people, don't have that, training about having empathy for people. If anything like that's going on, you let us know. You give us a call. We'll come and talk to folks.
You can help.
We definitely can help.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much for being on with me this afternoon. I know you were a great advocate because I've heard you speak before. We've traveled the same circles here.
We do. And I appreciate that, Connie, and all that you do and all of the partners, all of our allies that we see on a regular basis in this city. We should all be very proud of that circle that we've built, but we've got to stand up and be louder, I think.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And thank you for listening. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Good day.